Lesson 109 is on advanced trinomial factoring, and the difference between factoring these trinomials and other ones that you've been doing is now you have a coefficient other than 1 in front of the x squared term. And so it'll just be a little more complex. You'll have to think about it a little bit more on how to factor them. And usually what you can do as a first step is, like in 2x squared, you set up your two binomials just like you always do when you're factoring a trinomial. And in one of them you can say 2x and the other one x. You know, normally what you would do is you'll have a trinomial maybe like this one, and you'd break that up into two binomials, and you'd put an x and an x at the beginning of each binomial because of x times x equals x squared. Now since you have a 2x squared, you can put 2x in front of one and x in front of the other one. Now the next thing you need to think about is your x coefficient is a -9 and then your constant is a -5. So if the constant is a -5, that means the term that goes right here and the term that goes right here, those two have to multiply together to equal a -5. So one of them has to be a negative, the other one a positive, to get a -5. Now you just have to figure out where they should go in order for you to get back to 2x squared minus 9x minus 5. So let's just put a -5 here and a +1 here and see if that works. The way you can check it is just to expand it back out. Multiply 2x by x, that would be 2x squared. Multiply 2x by 1, that would be a 2x. Now multiply the -5 times x and you get -5x. And we can stop there because we know it's not going to work. 2x and a -5x, that equals a -3x. So that's not correct. So let's scratch that and try something else. We'll put 2x here and x here. Now we have a -9 there, so why don't we put the -5 over here, because when we multiply 2x by -5 we'd end up with a -10x, and then we put the +1 here. When we multiply 1 by x we'll have a +x, and we'd have +x and a -10x. That would give us the -10x or -9x that we need. And so this is the appropriate factoring of that trinomial. Before, when we were factoring trinomials where the x squared coefficient was a 1, it didn't matter if we put the 3 and the 2 here, or we could have said x plus 2 times x plus 3. It didn't matter where we put those constant values. Now it matters a great deal because it depends on what we get for an x coefficient. When we expand that pair of binomials back out, we may not get the original trinomial if we don't put them in the right place. So as you're learning about doing these, you should just check your work. Let's go ahead and do that. 2x times x is 2x squared. Then do 2x times -5 is -10x. 1 times x is just a +x. 1 times -5 is -5. And we see that that middle pair of x terms there would add up to -9x. So we did it right that time. Let's do another one. Factor that trinomial, 3x squared plus 3x minus 6. So first, let's make a pair of parentheses and put 3x at the beginning of the first one, x at the beginning of the second one. Now, we know that our two constant terms, they need to multiply together to equal a -6. There's a lot of different factors that might work. -3 and 2, -2 and 3, -1 and 6, 6 and -6 and +1. That would work as well. Those are all pairs of factors of -6. Now just think about what happens when we multiply these constant terms that are going to go here and here. We multiply the outside two terms together and these inside two terms together when we're figuring out that x coefficient. So to get a +3x in the middle, what would work would be if a -3 was here and a +2 was here, because then you'd have -3x and a positive 6x, which would add up to a positive 3x. So that's what would work, and that's our two binomials, 3x minus 3 parentheses x plus 2. And so that's the factored form of that trinomial. Now, as you're learning to do these, it's a good idea just to substitute a couple of constant terms in and try to expand that back out and see if it works right. If it does, then go on. If not, then pick another pair of factors. But doing it in your head, that may end up confusing you more than anything. Always, though, at least check your work when you're done to make sure that you did it right. Let's do one more. 7x plus 2x squared minus 4. Now that one doesn't look like a trinomial. It's just because it's not in standard form. So we just need to get it in standard form. That means descending order of the power of the variable. So 2x squared goes first, plus 7x minus 4. And so we can start by making two sets of parentheses, and we'll put 2x at the beginning of one, x at the beginning of the other one. And then we can think, well, we need a constant term here and a constant term here that when they're multiplied together, they would equal a negative 4. And then when we multiply this by this and this term by that one, it's like the inside 2 by the outside 2 equal the x term. And that's just a little something to remember. You do the inside 2 by the outside 2, and you think, well, what would work here? And you can just think to yourself, well, if you had a negative 2 and a negative 2, you'd end up with a negative 2x and a negative 4x. That's a negative 6x. That's not right. How about a 4 and a negative 1? Then you'd have a 4x and a negative 2x, which would be a positive 2x. So how about a 1 and a negative 4? So then you'd have an x and a negative 8x, which would give you a negative 7x, which is close. It's just the opposite of what we want. So what we really want is a negative 1 and a positive 4, right? Because then when we multiply those, we'd have a negative x and a positive 8x, which gives us a positive 7x. So we can just write down 2x minus 1 times x plus 4. And so that's the answer. So there's a little more thinking involved here on figuring out what constant terms to put in. Not only that, but where do they go? Negative 1 and positive 4 work, but we can't just put them wherever we want to. The negative 1 has to go with the 2x, the positive 4 with the x. And so you can write out several different pairs of binomials and expand them to see which one works. Or if you want to, do it in your head and do it like I'm doing. Remember this step here that I just drew the arrow on. You've got to multiply the inside 2 and then the outside 2 to get your x term and its coefficient of x. So just figure out a method that works best for you on these problems. If you need to write out several pairs of binomials and just figure out which one works, then do it that way for now until you get better at it and you can figure out the process better, and then you'll be able to do it in your head a little bit more. Okay, well that's all for lesson 109.